Hello, Connecticut, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. The title basically says it all. I'm Nancy Barrow, and I will be delving into this new state program and how it can help you and your family. This podcast will give you information you should know about Connecticut paid leave and maybe just a little bit more. Connecticut paid leave brings peace of mind to your home, family, and workplace. Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. April is Autism Acceptance Month, and the cost of caring for people with autism is predicted to reach $461 billion by 2025 in the U.S. Autism and other related social disorders affect hundreds of thousands of adults and children across the United States. It's known as a spectrum disorder with many different levels. Researchers have recently compiled a list of the top 15 states that have the highest rates of autism. Connecticut is listed at number 9 on that list. Researchers aren't really sure exactly what causes autism, and it's unlikely that geographical area directly affects the chance of a child being born with autism, and that comes from the Autism Parenting magazine. The latest research in 2023 from the CDC shows that 1 in 36 children is now diagnosed with autism. It's an increase from 1 in 44 just 2 years ago. And since the report was recently released, the data is likely to stay the same for 2024. Although autism can be diagnosed before a child reaches the age of 2, most kids are diagnosed only after the age of 4. 40% are nonverbal, 44% have average or above average intellectual ability, and 31 have an intellectual disability. Autism Speaks defines autism spectrum disorder as a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behavior speech, and nonverbal communication. Connecticut paid leave can help with income replacement to take care of your own serious health condition or that of a loved one. And caregiver leave allows a parent or a guardian to take their child to doctor's appointments, treatments, and therapies, whether that's physical or speech or occupational or mental health. Autism is considered to be a chronic condition, which then allows a patient to apply for Connecticut paid leave every year for up to the 12 weeks of income replacement with appointments, treatments, and flare-ups. Joining the podcast today are Dr. K. She has a PhD. She's worked extensively with children. She is the CEO and founder of the Hopewell Health Solutions. That also features the Academy for Tweens and Teens Intensive Outpatient Therapy Programs. They have 7 locations. I'll put all that information into the podcast show notes. Dr. K, thank you so much for being on the Paid Leave Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And joining us is my friend, Alanna. I have known Alanna for, over 20 years. We worked together at the same radio station. And for as long as I've known Alanna, she has always wanted to be a mom. Mason's in college, Mara's 16. And after you got divorced, you met someone new and you got pregnant. And I think everyone was like, wow, Alanna's pregnant. And she had Lawson.
Thank you for all the kind words.
Well, thanks for being on the Paid Leave Podcast. I'm excited to talk to you.
Would you like to hear about my little man?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the story of Lawson.
The story of Lawson is he was a COVID baby, very much a surprise for me as a quote unquote geriatric pregnant woman. Normal pregnancy, normal birth, everything was fine. And when he was about 9 months old, I started noticing little differences. What I will tell you, it was amazing with how many people told me I was crazy. Pediatricians, friends, families, partners, everyone said I was crazy, which is the most disheartening thing to hear from people that are supposed to be your support. And I said, no, something's not right. And I know from my previous 2 children who were speech delayed that it was more than just a speech delay. Like it was more than we just don't want to talk. Like there was some wire of communication that wasn't connected in Lawson's brain. We got him early intervention, which is a huge plus, and thankful that the state offers it. And when he was 16 to 18 months, we got him tested for autism and autism spectrum disorder, and he was autistic and on the spectrum. It wasn't really an official diagnosis, but we got put on a waiting list to see a developmental pediatrician, which 2 years later was the first time that we were able to get Lawson in.
Wow.
The wait list is crazy. So we got him in. And at the time, because although it was post-COVID, everything was done virtually. So we had to send videos, and through that, we got our diagnosis that he is level 2 on the autism spectrum.
And what does that mean, level 2, Alanna?
From my knowledge, and I am not a professional, so maybe the doctor could better answer, level 1 is more like what was known as Asperger's, like high functioning, is just a little bit off kilter. Level 2 is a little bit more like with Lawson, it's called autism spectrum disorder. What I wasn't aware of is how big that spectrum is. So someone, I can only speak to my experience with my son and what level 2 means to us. Level 2 to somebody else can be a completely different child. And that is what's so hard, I think, to understand about autism spectrum disorder and children that are labeled on the spectrum.
So what did that mean for you as a parent?
Well, one, selfishly speaking, it meant vindication because I knew. As we're going deeper and deeper into what he needs, it's becoming very stressful. And I will say there are some people who have children on the spectrum that throw them into therapy, ABA, OT, speech. For me and for Lawson and our life, I, at this point, don't feel he needs that much therapy. You know, he was diagnosed early, which is great. And maybe as he progresses, he might need more. But for us and for my family and for my other kids, because I can't neglect them either, right? We're doing what we feel is best for our family and for Lawson.
Do you hear that a lot, that when parents have multiple children, that it is a lot, that it's a lot for them?
I think it's a lot, even sometimes with one. I think it's always a balancing act, you know, and I think, Alanna, what you're doing is like so awesome because there are a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions about what you're supposed to do and supposed experts and this and that. I always tell people, listen, you're the mom, you're the parent. Instinctually, you should, I want you to tune into what is best for your child. I can give you whatever recommendations, but ultimately, you know, that's a family decision. That's a decision. You are the biggest stakeholder of your child's life, you know, whether that's school decisions or decisions about therapies or whatever you're talking about, vaccinations or whatever, you know, that is a parental choice. What you have to understand with doctors, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but because we see so many people all the time, we do have a tendency to put people into boxes, right? And some of that is insurance based, and some of that is based on our training, and some of that is just because we've honestly gotten into that's what we do, right? And a lot of people want that. They want to know what box is it? As I get older, I'm much more conservative about doing that because I have seen the downfall of that. And I have seen even just within my own practice, young kids that were labeled autistic by the supposed expert. And they come in and I have them in IOP, and I will tell the parents, I'm like, I do not see a label of autism here. And the kid is wrapped up in this autism diagnosis and what is wrong with me? And it could be anything, right? Depression, anxiety. I don't want people to be diagnoses. I want people to be people that have hurdles to overcome because of Google and the age of information and everything that's out there. It's extremely dangerous in terms of throwing labels around and people getting caught up in because that person has autism or depression and anxiety and they can't do X, Y, and Z. I can't do X, Y, and Z. And kids are so vulnerable to what they can do and what they can't do and what their future is. I don't want to limit anybody in anything. Look at Elon Musk, right? Look at all these people the smartest people, the most innovative people that we have different minds. They're autistic, they're dyslexic, they have, depression, anxiety, artists. You think about the biggest people that make the most amazing things, they are not the norm. This whole labeling thing and then the Googling thing is not good.
I've always said to my other two kids, normal is boring. Who wants to be normal?
Right, exactly.
And artists, performers, business people, anyone who is really successful in a certain trade isn't quote unquote normal.
They are neurodiverse. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because they can hyper focus, right? They hyper focus.
They see things. I mean, like their brains are literally different when they look at CAT scans with people that have like dyslexia and people that have autism and even some people who have depression. Like their brains look different. Their brains are operating differently. So they're accessing a different part of their brain. So they're able to think outside of the box, and everything innovative comes from people who say, well, that doesn't work. How about this? And people initially think that's crazy. And then that ends up being what everybody recognizes was a good idea.
And I see your videos, Alanna, and, Lawson is dancing with a group of kids and he loves his dog. Like, he is so cute with your dog. You take him to Mystic Aquarium and he's very inquisitive, So what does he like and what have you found that he doesn't like?
He doesn't love lots of different food, which is a very, very typical thing with children on the spectrum. There's very few things he actually doesn't like. He's sometimes scared of new experiences, but if we're there to kind of slowly coax him through it, he'll eventually kind of like, oh, wait, I kind of like this. He loves music. He loves to dance. He loves YouTube. Lately, he's into drawing. And much like what the doctor just said, you actually could see him thinking. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but he looks at a logo and then looks at the paper and draws. But you could see his mind process. It's the most beautiful thing. His positive and his superpower, as I call it, is he's hyperlexic, which means he loves letters. And he actually, at almost 4, can read sight words. So
wow. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, like, I can't even express how beautiful it is. But funny enough is in some worlds and in some therapies, he'd still be considered nonverbal because his communication and his understanding of communication, if you ask him how was his day, he'll look at you blankly. So which is sort of bizarre. And again, it kind of goes back to like, who is anyone to tell me to me, my son is verbal. We are in speech therapy. He speaks. He explains what he needs maybe in his own way. But if you know him and his teachers know him and his daycare providers know him, there's no question. So he loves to read. He loves books. He loves our dogs. When we're somewhere, and I'm not one to hide things. So when we're out somewhere and someone's like, well, he doesn't look autistic. Well, like, what does autistic mean? Again, because the spectrum is so broad. Yeah. And I'm guilty of, before I had Lawson, thinking that people on the spectrum were a certain way. The good thing about having Lawson is that he's opened my eyes to so many beautiful things about people on the spectrum, no matter what level they are on.
What advice would you give parents who may have gotten a diagnosis?
A couple of things. One, it's okay to throw temper tantrums and be sad and cry and be angry, because as positive as I'm being right now, I've done all of those things. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm old and I'm tired. And the amount of effort that has to be put into it is a lot of effort. However, he is a ray of light. He's just adorable and he's smart. And the other advice that I would give to parents, and it might not be great advice, is don't take advice from other people. You need to do what works best for your family and for your child and for your own mental health and their own mental health and your child that's on the spectrum. It's not all about him or her. There's got to be a dynamic that you all kind of have to compromise and do what's best for everybody.
Yeah, Dr. K, I think you've talked about that to me. It's a very holistic approach, right? The family's involved with therapy and the kids, because it's a family issue.
And sometimes schools, sometimes you have to have schools involved as well. There's a lot of stakeholders in kids' lives, and just treating a child by themselves in a closed room without parental involvement, which is actually the way a lot of therapists do it. We don't do that at Hopewell. I don't agree with that model, but that sort of closed door model where the child is my patient and I don't have any communication communicate with the pediatrician. I don't communicate with the outside schools, and and not really letting the parents know what's happening in therapy. That is not a model I recommend. I really think parents need to be very good consumers of mental health therapy. I think you need to know what's happening in mental health sessions. I think you need to ask the therapist what they're doing, how they're doing it, what the goals are for therapy, and regular communication, and ask them to communicate with the other stakeholders in that child's life so that everybody can be on the same page to help move a child forward. Children are not little adults, so they should not be treated as such.
Interesting. And what are you thinking about school for Lawson? Like, how do you envision that?
He is in preschool right now. He goes 4 days a week, 4 half days. I've always known where we live, the preschool program for kids with special needs is top notch. In fact, not excited is the wrong word, but when I knew that Lawson was on the spectrum, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be so comfortable bringing him to school. I'm also a little bit of a control freak. I like to be involved in every aspect of Lawson's care because I don't want closed doors. I don't want to mask, like a lot of therapies try to mask the autism. I don't want to do that. I want him to be loud and proud, positive and negative. There are things that needs to be worked on. He needs visual aids to like remember routines. But again, he's only 4. I think from my experience, a lot of therapies and a lot of facilities expect so much of him. And I'm like, he's 4. There are kids that are not on the spectrum that have trouble following directions, So I actually trust my school and the people that are working with Lawson more than I trust the advice of his developmental pediatrician. Because
what school is he at? I'm just wondering.
Valley View in Portland, Connecticut.
Oh, okay. So I'm in Marlboro.
Okay. So,
Good to know.
Yeah, pretty. But like, again, like his teachers. And here's the thing. I'm going to caveat that with because my older 2 kids did also go through the school system. So there's some familiarity with who I am. Not that I am anyone, but they know my older kids. They know that they're good kids. And, here now 12 years later is another little sibling, so, but they've been helpful. They approach me with, hey, we're having issues with this. We're having issues with that. Like, I also now am in the process of, he's the only kid on the spectrum at his daycare. So they're kind of not knowing how to handle certain things that he does. Yeah. But I'm in the process of trying to connect everybody so we could do what's best for him. And the way I look at it is twofold. People that are at the daycare are learning, really, if they also want to get into childhood education, how to deal with someone on the spectrum and how to deal with someone that's a little bit not your neurotypical normal child. Also, it gives Lawson growth to be with kids that are neurotypical. I'm in the process of getting the school to talk to his speech therapists, to then talk to the daycare, and all be one big circle and one big village for Lawson.
What are your hopes for Lawson? When you see his future, what are your hopes for him?
Oh my God. He's so flippin' smart. And he loves music. So I really envision something in the arts. What I just found out, and I thought this was interesting, and it's way down the line, but there are some colleges that actually have programs for neurodivergent people. So, which is huge because, again, a lot of this is unknown to me. And maybe for some people it's super known. But I'm like, oh, there's colleges where, and again, I don't know what he's going to be like at 18. But it made me so happy to know that there are options, because putting his brain to waste is a sad, sad thing for everyone in this world.
Yeah. By the time he goes to college, I mean, that's rapidly developing so quickly that people are recognizing that these kids can absolutely go to college with supports, that a lot of kids, the typical college experience does not work. So colleges are rapidly changing to try to accommodate different kinds of kids, whether they have depression or anxiety, or they have autism, or they have certain learning needs. They need money also. So that's part of it too. But absolutely, by the time he goes to college, that's already started, and they're just rapidly building these programs. Yeah.
It's really good. I know I reached out to you, Alanna, about Connecticut paid leave, and it's here for you if you need to take Lawson for any type of therapy, and you can put in for whether it's block leave or intermittent or reduced schedule. But I know that you have a really supportive company that you're working for.
Well, and I appreciate that so much. Like I'm fortunate that where I work now is extremely understandable. It's a small family run company. However, there is some comfort knowing that Connecticut paid leave, if and when I need it, will be there.
Well, I appreciate you so much. I know you have to get back to work, but I want to thank you so much for sharing your personal and your beautiful story about Lawson.
Anytime, Nance. I appreciate you and all your work that you're doing.
Well, thanks. And thank you for being on the Paid Leave podcast. Continued success with Lawson and be the amazing mom you always are.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Dr. K, when you heard Alanna's story, what were your thoughts?
I think that she's like a phenomenal mother. I think she's the kind of mom that I really try to encourage our parents to be, in terms of listening to recommendations, but really doing what's the best thing for your family, making sure that you keep everything in perspective. I think people get very upset about, and rightly so, about certain diagnoses or certain, for example, at Hopewell Health and the IOP program, sometimes we're seeing kids that are coming out of hospitals because of, suicidality or suicide ideation or self-harm. These kids have been in a hospital, sometimes overnight, but sometimes for even a couple of weeks. Rightly so, parents are extremely stressed and worried. And sometimes parents weren't even aware that kids were having these very serious issues. The most important thing is perspective and then taking action, right? Mm-hmm. So kids, they have wide ranges of emotions. It's hard for us being in our mid 50s now, right? Thinking about what it was like to be a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid. But there's also just a lot of different stresses that were not around that.
Social media wasn't around.
Social media is enormous, the computer, the isolation, the impact of COVID that we're still seeing, and the sort of restructuring of schools and just sort of a lack of structure in a lot of kids' lives, that kids really, and this idea of like self-harm and suicidality, unfortunately does have a social media contagion component to it. So you have social media influencers who will talk about suicide and who will even talk about self-harm, and very dangerous. There's just a lot of information that these kids, and as a young, when I think about you and I growing up, it used to be like, where did we get our crazy information? Was it like graffiti in the bathroom?
I think it was like the neighborhood kids, right? Like you're playing freeze tag, and then I don't know. I mean, we didn't have computers until I was in high school.
Right? So like our worlds were so small, right? Mm-hmm. And the amount of information that we were exposed to was very, very, very limited. And now it's sort of like, holy God, they have information everywhere. And if you want to look up ways to kill yourself, or like, sometimes my son will show me these videos that he finds on like TikTok and stuff. And it just like, it blows my mind about what is actually out there. And
it can be good, social media, but it's
right.
It's so detrimental. I think it's such a big social problem. Kids compare themselves to like these people who look like they have these big lives, but maybe in actuality they don't, but it makes kids feel less than.
And it also gives them ideas. Like if you're depressed, that doesn't mean that you need to have suicidal thoughts or you need to be self-harming. That could just mean that you're depressed, mm-hmm. and that you need a couple changes in your life. And mental health is now like really part of the culture, which is awesome. I'm glad people are talking about it. But the other piece of it is there's just so much misinformation, and there's also a lot of lack of information about what to actually do if you really do have a mental health problem and how to take care of it.
Well, let's go back for a minute and give me some background about you and how and why you created Hopewell Health Solutions. How did that all come about?
I always wanted to be in private practice. I always wanted to have my own business. So I had started out working in schools and hospitals and working for other people for a number of years. And then I decided to go into practice for myself.
Interesting. And I know that you treat kids who are on the spectrum. Are there different issues that they face or different therapies that you would use for them? Or is it pretty much the same for kids across the board?
So it's a small group setting, which a lot of people are nervous about putting kids that either have social anxiety or kids that have autism into group settings. And I actually say that that is the absolute best thing to do because we are able to support them really supremely within that setting. We have very high staff ratios. We can make different accommodations within the groups. We can pull kids out. We can help keep them a little bit more outside of the group and then slowly bring them in. And then help them sort of introduce how to talk to peers and how to relate to peers and how to deal with some sensory issues. So we're really able to help these kids almost like, mild exposure therapy and get them to the point that they're able to function in groups and in schools and with their peers. We've been extremely successful. Every single kid that we've had in our IOP program who had school refusal issues or had not been to school or going to school, we've been able to get them back into school 100% of the time.
That's amazing.
Because our program gives them that exposure that they need and that kind of confidence again to be able to interact with their peers and not be afraid of those situations.
Do most kids have coexisting social disorders like anxiety and depression, and maybe they're on the spectrum? Do they have coexisting behaviors?
So, yeah, I mean, everybody's different. I would say the primary focus of the kids, most of the kids that we see have either a depression and or an anxiety diagnosis. They don't have to be, it's a total misnomer. They don't have to be suicidal. You don't have to be self-harming. You don't have to have, really super significant issues to be an IOP. We do not take any kids we're also completely unique in Connecticut. We are the only IOP for teens that does not take kids that have substance abuse disorders or eating disorders. So our focus is strictly mental health. And all of the kids in there are strictly mental health focused, which is very unique.
You know about Connecticut paid leave, and I know that you do talk to your parents and caregivers of the kids.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think Connecticut paid leave helps your families that you treat at Hopewell Solutions?
So I always offer it, and we've had several families need it and take advantage of it. And because it's a lot of therapy, it's a lot of driving. I mean, the kids have to be there at 5:00. Different people have different work schedules. So, and it's, and there is a parental component involved. And so we've had several parents need that, and we're happy to fill out any kind of paperwork because it is considered an intensive program. And it is, again, very important. It's time limited. So, taking a short break or, reduced hours from work is something that people absolutely need to do to get their kids help. And then they're able to go back to work again. And that's the beauty of paid leave, is that your job is secured, and you can go back to your job and it's there for you. But every once in a while, everyone needs, most people will probably need a timeout every once in a while, either to take care of themselves or to take care of someone else.
Yeah. And it's really important driving the kids to their therapy. I mean,
Right.
that they have that
Oh,
flexibility and they can leave work and not have to worry about income. Any final thoughts about April being Autism Acceptance Month and what that means?
Well, I just love that it's acceptance. I mean, it's sort of sad that we need to have an acceptance month because I think we should all be accepting of everybody at this point. But what I would say is that I think just generally, overall, as a society, we are becoming much more aware of what's called neurodiverse people, right? People who think differently, people whose brains are different, people who have, a difference in their ability to understand things. And of course, autism is in there. And I think we're finally recognizing the power and talent that is within this group of people, and how we can try to use and weave them in, and maybe everybody can learn from each other, right? Like I think the biggest thing in life, I always tell people, is to learn about yourself, know yourself, and then build a life that works for you around that. And it's going to be different for everybody. So if your child or you are having problems, it is really important to pay attention to that and to get some intensive help right away, rather than waiting for something more serious to happen.
Dr. Kay, founder and CEO of Hopewell Health Solutions, thank you so much for your expertise on the Paid Leave podcast. It was really nice getting to speak with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
And please let us know if we can help out anyway with webinars. Connecticut Paid Leave, we can give you more digital or hard copies of any of our infographics. We'd just love to help you and your patients and your families any way we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
For more information about Hopewell Health Solutions, go to the website at hopewellhealthsolutions.com. Call 860-946-0447. And again, thanks to my friend Alanna for sharing her personal story with us. For more information or to apply for benefits, go to ctpaidleave.org. This has been another edition of the Paid Leave Podcast. Please like and subscribe so you'll be notified about new podcasts that become available. Connecticut Paid Leave is a public act with a personal purpose. I'm Nancy Barrow, and thanks for listening.